So, hello everybody, and welcome back to the next edition of the Cosmic History Codes. This is episode number 5. My name is Davyd Farrell, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, my teacher and guide from the Stellar Nations Pathway, the one and only Leslie Shankman. Hi, Leslie, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
Right, so we've been on a pretty epic journey, I think, Leslie, since the beginning of this year. And I know that many of the people watching the recent editions of the Cosmic History Codes have been feeling it too. And today we're going to have a little sort of, I guess, peer into the crystal ball and see what's coming at us very, very quickly from the sort of the stellar aspect, or we can say the star influence perspective. Now, we're going to put this into the framework of the more mundane astrology of what's coming up this coming weekend on April the 20th, which is a cycle ending and cycle beginning conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus. However, the point of this show is not to reiterate what's already out there in some other great astrological previews and podcasts, but we're going to take a different pulse. And I know that you've been looking into this deeply over the last week or so and feeling into the influences that the stars have on us at the soul level, and how do we put the pieces together so that we're really starting to embody our multidimensional selves, both here in the 3D with the mundane astrology, but also at the stellar influence level, which is going to connect us more into our 5, 6, 7, and even 8th dimensional selves. So there's a lot to talk about today. We've promised that we're going to try and keep it under a certain time. We never stick to that, and I don't think anyone minds too much because there's always so much to listen to. But how do you want to set this one up, Leslie?
Well, let's go with the slides because at least it can keep us on track, okay? So I'll get that up.
I hope that we don't have some sort of notorious reputation for always saying things the long way around, but I feel like when the material
You're Gemini IC and I'm Gemini Sun, so we're kind of cooked, and they're opposite each other. We've got about the same degree.
Look, when the stories are this good, I think that they're worth the airtime, to be honest. And yeah, so.
Okay, so not to repeat everything, some of the audience will know, some won't. We're going to be talking about cosmic history that has come out of the work of stellarnations.com in Hungary. And a lot of it's based on this book, Stellar Nations, Soul Families, which is the cosmic history of the Milky Way galaxy. And that's a mapping of about 250 stars. And really, we've come to understand that stars are sentient, that stars, we literally live on the stars. Our soul aspects live on the stars because we each have a unique Antares code when we're born. That's like a mapping of, we bring in certain soul aspects as a bigger blueprint. So at any rate, this will become more evident as we continue to talk, that because the stars, if you think about our soul aspects are on the stars, that is us. And we are learning how to be more coherently informed by all that. And what I want to do today is talk about the April 20th, the Jupiter and the Uranus conjunction, but from a slightly different perspective. And that's what we're going to do is, I've said this before, but we know we live within a, well, maybe we don't know, but we should know. We live within a vastly immense organism that has consciousness and order. And when we recognize the stellar rays within ourselves, we expand our consciousness and the planetary consciousness towards a stellar consciousness, which recodes our collective consciousness. But today, what I really want to do is look at what's happening on April 20th, mainly through the stars, because there's so many messages. So that's parts of ourselves talking to us. And we know from, if you've watched past things, but I just will reiterate, that our sun is an 8th Pleiadian star, little brother to the 7 sisters. And at the start of another Aquarian age, long, long ago, he was akin to an adolescent energy. He looked at his father Atlas, who he thinks of as Saturn, and he thought, this is boring, I'm not going to do that. And he roiled, and he broke out of his 6th dimensional consciousness and fell into the 4th dimension and into a big coma. He was finally revived when another photon belt path came around, and he was drenched with light, and he heard his Pleiadian family. And the Galactic Council came forward and gave him mercy. and granted him the right to recreate his fate by creating the solar system. And he did that. He dreamed up each planet because his fate was really to be like his father Atlas and to manage the energies of worldly bodies. So he dreamed up the solar system first with Tiamat, who he dreamed up, who was a representation of his Pleiadian family, and particularly his mother Pleione. And she was his co-partner and actually helped him create all the planets. And the planets are really pieces of his psyche, as we'll see, because he picked the planets, or he fashioned them with the thought of they're parts of me or they're parts of my family. And that's part of the story of how he learns to manage them. He's really learning to manage himself. And in essence, this is a reflection of us, because as above, so below, we're in the solar system. I said we have soul particles on stars. Stars are sentient beings. Our sun is sentient. We certainly have soul particles on our sun. And this is the radix for today. And we have a lot going on, as we know, in Pisces and in Aries and Taurus, and actually in Virgo over here. But what really struck me when I looked at all this was the fact that, oh my gosh, we've got so many things in the early 20 degrees. So I wanted to look at what are the stellar messages coming through. And this is what we're going to do. I highlighted, I'll bring this chart back a few times, but I have really slides to show us this because it's hard to look at this. But we've got 7 planetary bodies to look at and their energies. And the thing about it is, all these aspects are parts of Solana's psyche. And as we speak of them, remember that, because they're also parts of our psyche. And because this is a picture from April 20th, where we just took it on that date, it applies really to our globe, to our collective unconsciousness. We could do this for our individual self on our birthday or a solar return, but this is really talking about what are we feeling as a collective in consciousness. And as we go through each thing, there's going to be very specific messages. And I think something that we can realize is, often we feel like we want to state that we're one way or another way, but we start to realize, well, yeah, I'm this, but I'm that. And it's true of us, actually, even as we're reflected in the stars, our light body being the cells of various stars. Some of those stars are quite attained, even Christed consciousness. Some of them are shadowy and lower octave. Like, we have all of that. And we're on this pathway of trying to recognize that and then to harmonize them, to raise the octaves of the lower, which involves getting rid of shadow or integrating shadow at times. But just keep these things in mind as a concept when we go through all this. So what we've got is, I'm going to suggest, since our sun, who is known as Solana in the stellar nations, and this really comes from Bay and Anako, who do this work, having a profound connection with stellar consciousness for all their lives. And this is from them literally moving their consciousness to these bodies and having conversations. So that's where I'm getting this information. Jupiter.
I was going to say, don't you think, I mean, we have this concept like that we perceive these energies of the planets, and yet somehow for many of us, it's kind of like, oh, like the sun has also got a consciousness, and it's almost like a shock to think about that. But then it's like, but it was easy for us astrologers to think about all of the other planets having some sort of consciousness and spirit, and yet somehow we'd kind of sideline the sun. And I think what's becoming more obvious to many of us is like, no, the sun is really the most important consciousness of all here. It's the one directing the show, and maybe he's also remembering that in himself. And so I just wanted to add that in, because it's an idea that I hadn't really contemplated much until, I guess, the end of last year through doing these conversations with you. And maybe for other people, it's like, oh my gosh, like the sun has a consciousness. It's like, well, why wouldn't it? Everything else does, right? So what is the consciousness of the sun?
It's the total consciousness of being the conductor And that's
Right.
and what I've been feeling with all these Cazimis since the beginning of the year, we've been trying to hit on the Cazimis, is that our sun, because we're coming into another Aquarian age, and his big lapse was in a past Aquarian age when he was more of a teenage energy. And he has learned so much. He has learned what his father was really trying to tell them. Not that he would be standing there, but that what he needed to do was to be steady, to be reliable, to be strong, because he'd be like a gear for evolution, because everything is constantly moving in creation. And his fate was to orchestrate that, like his father. And that's anything but boring. And he also has seen in all these, whatever, large cosmic time that, I mean, he's had a lot of failures, planets have exploded, things have happened, there's stuff happening. But if we want to break down that our sun is the main conductor, and he has a psyche, and the other planets are actually kind of extensions of his own psyche, representing his Pleiadian family or his aspects of himself. I want to bring out what are the pieces of his psyche, because that's really us. And then on these 20-degree points, because they're all kind of related in that they're so close as far as the degree energy, I want to bring out what do the stars want to tell us? And there's some really beautiful messages, and there's some pointed messages. And it's one, and we can decide in the end if there's one message. But I think what I want to also say is that's the point of being human, of anything in creation. There's many perspectives and things moving, and that's what we have to learn to do, is how do we work with that flow? How do we be present and let creation come through? I think we're all starting to learn that, because we realize that's more of a fifth dimensional consciousness. But if I finish what the imagination I've gone with, and it's from the books too, so but what are the pieces of Solana's psyche? Well, let's imagine Jupiter as his soul, his pure soul, his expanded self, the truth of what he is, what he wants. Now, it turns out this is not an astrological conception. This is a stellar conception. Uranus, in Solana's mind, was actually his memory of his Pleiadian sister, Merope. And we will meet her and we'll know her nature. And that can throw a little bit of a different cast that can add to our understanding of Jupiter and Uranus, perhaps. Then we've got happening too, we talked about it last time, how Mars is kind of racing through Pisces. But last time we talked about how he sat with Saturn, who he considers he based Saturn in his mind off his father Atlas. And he always thought that his father was onerous, and yes, he would have to stand in a box, but he's growing up and realizing that's not true. We talked about the poignancy of the messages they held together in the last video, so I won't do that again. But Mars has been moving forward. There's definite messages there. It's really interesting because Mars in Pisces is directly opposite, only literally a few minutes opposite Lilith in Virgo. And this kind of plays in, we'll see it when we looked at the stars, but we talked about how when Mars sat with Saturn, it was like a father-son tete-a-tete. It was also the realization Saturn was more of this kind of Dharma soul level type of directive, whereas Mars was a little bit more the ego force. And Saturn was representative of a matured yang, especially in the way that Atlas really meant. Maybe not, we project on Saturn too, that it can get calcified, and it can in our 3D world. But the truth of that real aspect of Saturn, as far as on the celestial level, it's like, no, it's an agent of, as I said, helping energy move and continue to cycle. So we had that tete-a-tete happening, and we talked about last time that the mature we were coming into a time where the masculine needed to mature. And we saw last time how the feminine has come quite far and maybe quite receptive to receiving a mature masculine. And that if this plays out today a little bit, we'll see that. And then we also have Venus, who is, in Solana's mind, his Pleiadian sister Electra. And we have Chiron, who Solana feels like was put in his solar system actually as a gift for him, as a mirror to himself, but also as a mirror to the solar system inhabitants. See, we have to understand our sun would dearly love to go back to the Pleiades, but he's created a new family in our solar system. So part of the cosmic rearrangement that's hypothetically could happen, I don't know what it will look like, but our sun really can't leave us. So he's very invested in us evolving and maturing. And Earth is the focal point of all this, because that's what the divine mind and the sun have deigned.
So you've talked about the cosmic rearrangement a few times, Leslie, and it's not the scope of today's show, but just to give a heads up to our audience about what's coming, as we've talked about this Jupiter Cazimi on May the 18th. And when you look at the point in the Antares code where that Jupiter Cazimi is happening, it's laden with stars, and some of them are really, really difficult, and some of them are really, really amazing. So when I keep looking at this, I keep seeing that cosmic rearrangement really heading towards that point, which you rightly said was 40 days exactly to the day from the total solar eclipse on April the 8th. So again, I just want to reiterate to those listeners, I personally feel that we are in this incredible journey right now of the sun writing everything so that we can come fully into a different type of existence with this being, with the sun. And he's given us the opportunity to experience it with him somehow.
I agree with you to a point, because I do believe that, Jupiter Cazimi is going to be big, because if we think of Jupiter as the soul of the sun, and when he gets to that point, he's meeting his whole Pleiadian families, plus some other really hard stars. So it's kind of this reckoning, because if you think of these Cazimis, I've said of our sun adulting, as far as literal cosmic rearrangement, like where Earth becomes a Merkaba, say, and
yeah, okay, maybe not that extent, but I feel like more here.
In 40 days.
No, I think that would be a bit of a shock for all of us.
We have to keep that in mind. No, you're right. We have to keep that in mind. And there are these key points along the way. So
maybe we could view this more as one of those like slightly dubious Christmas dinners where the whole family gets together, and it could go this way and it could be really amazing, or it could go the other way and it could be a little bit of a munchkin fest where everyone has their say about something, and then everyone kind of gets a bit wounded, and then the Christmas dinner turns out to be one of those kind of mess situations. But I'm going for the positive option, which is this is how to say, maybe a family realignment, and perhaps whatever has happened in the past can now be put to bed, and we're like, okay, so yeah, maybe in terms of a cosmic rearrangement, that's a little strong, but I feel that there is a big rearrangement that wants to happen here.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean,
Solana wants to rectify these things.
Yeah, it's good to think about it of coming to family and dinner, and every one of those Pleiadian stars, well, we'll see in a minute. They've had their dark night in their lifting, and then we've got Algol though, but we'll get there next month. So we have to do this one.
Exactly.
So as I mentioned, Jupiter is Solana's soul. Uranus, I'm going to explain why his Pleiadian sister Merope. But here's something really fascinating. On April 20th, there are no stars coming through these two planets. So it's kind of a statement in a way, I think. They have had one star, a Pegasus star called Rukba, on them off and on for months prior. I mean, I remember at the solstice looking at Uranus and going, oh my gosh, it has Rukba, only Rukba. We'll see why in a minute, why I was kind of wondering. I think there's something interesting in that they come to this day, and we're going to hear all the other voices, and they're getting together, and there's kind of a review of what do we need to come into this Aquarian age? How do we now need to be mature? And Merope can really help Jupiter or Solana, because we'll see why in a minute. So the star Rukbak, which is literally just it's not on it just by minute, like just mere minutes. They just got off of it. It's a Pegasus star, and it's the message that's sent to bring the news that a certain cycle of life, a developing spiral of life, a certain attachment, anything like that, has to come to an end. Okay, it's just like, please bring the message. It's ending. Okay.
Yeah, news alert, everybody, it's ending. I think that's very much what we're understanding about the energy is, and that's okay. Because when there's an ending, there's a beginning, right, Leslie? And I think that's
Right,
part of
so
the
we're going to
bigger
see that.
conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's see what all the other places say. But I find it kind of poetic that now those two sit there having carried that news, and they're sitting there without any stellar influences, almost like, okay, we're going to be grounded in talking to each other, that we need to get real. We're going to an Aquarian age. We've learned a lot. Well, Merope is advising Jupiter. We'll see in a minute. I'm just going to paraphrase this. This is some of this, what I'm telling you today, is from a book that's coming out momentarily, like in the next 6 weeks, probably, Stellar Destinies, which is a wonderful, amazing cosmic history. It's about 700 pages. But anyway, we can know that all the Pleiadian stars, except for Alcyon, have their own karmic histories, and they've completed their pathways through the ascension. And the masters of these stars shared their history. And we've understood from that there's like a starting point and a choreography of the descent, and then a turning point, and they turn upwards, seeking the light, and finally get lifted to completeness. So the point is, this is why I think it's nice to hear from Merope here, because the pathway of their descent and coming back is what became their lesson and the seed of their spiritual wisdom. And they can really help us humans to understand these situations because they know it from within. And in fact, our stellar influences are helping us all the time. So these are real lessons of humbleness, and they can help strengthen us by showing us that these inner struggles and the battles against ourselves and the world are something that have been experienced even by these stellar worlds.
Right.
So what these stars tell us are really good living examples for us. And I want to just highlight the last sentence. They carry the certainty that it is possible to be freed from any shadow quality and ascended into the light. Okay, so Merope.
Hey, Leslie, can we just go back to that slide and just reinforce that point? Because I think it's really, really important. And you gave us sort of a poignant pause there, which I was just feeling into. And it's just like, we can be aware that the confessions of these stars are great living examples for us. They carry the certainty that it is possible to be freed from any shadow quality and ascend into the light. I think that's really, really important. You know, on
That's
this part of the journey that we're on. Yeah,
right.
it's really deep.
And why I want to do this, like I'm so passionate about sharing this information, is because we literally are these. And they're really not out there. They're out there, but they're also in here. And
Right.
when we start to realize that, that's when we really expand in our understanding and awareness. And to use the overused word, we become much more multidimensional.
But it's true, and that's I think why me and you get so excited about this material. To us, it's not abstract, or it's not outside of ourselves, or it's not some kind of head candy to fill in the gaps between other stuff. It's like, no, this is stuff that we can live and experience and breathe through our own reality down here in 3D. And that's what I love about Stellar Nations and what it's given me over the last year is this it's new filter to experience myself as a cosmic soul being.
Right.
You know, and I think that's what this material offers all of us, which is why I just wanted to highlight that point. Even in the dark night of the soul, the light is always there within us, and we can always find that. And when we've got our Antares code and we understand our soul's journey to this point, we can always see the light, as I think we talked about in one of the other shows, the light at the end of the tunnel, which is very much, I think, within the filter of many beings on the planet right now, which is what can give us all hope that we're going to navigate whatever is coming towards the collective in the rest of 2024.
Right. That was the Phoenix star with the long dark
Excellent.
tunnel, but the light at the end. That was what Saturn and Mars were sharing back around the eclipse.
Yeah,
That was
really
part.
important. I think hold that visual
I
there
mean,
as
that
the
was
light at the
quite a
end.
profound conversation they had, really. And it was a really coming together in a loving way of, Solana coming back as an adult, like, oh, maybe I kind of see I was young and wrong or impetuous. So
Yeah.
what we've got with the Merope is, can't see the top. She wanted to explore her freedom and experience her own productive imagination, her creativity or emotional freedom. She wanted to experience possibilities. She wanted to create new dreams. She's a very Aquarian. She's the same kind of Aquarian soul that Solana had, as far as let's break out. In fact, Meropes were souls on the star of Alcyon, who left Alcyon because they're just like, oh man, this is boring. We're always of service. Let's go see what's out there. So she left, in a kind of a friendly way, but up here you can see it was literally like a teenage girl leaving with a backpack and coming down into the solar system. And over time, there's 3 stages of her growth. She went through the total rebellion, the leaving, the experiencing, enjoying it, and all that. But there came a point of realization, and this is a beautiful long chapter. I'm not doing it justice. You'll have to read it because there's many fine thoughts in there. But her realization was basically, chaos is not creativity. It's not productive. It doesn't serve the whole, just to have movement. And so she came to a point of stabilization after that. This is her 3rd stage. And what she started understanding is that galactic order has its own purpose. There's a mission and a sense to everything about galactic order. And it's important to find a golden mean, to find the balance between the free choice that we have and are meant to have and should have, but with cosmic order. Like, how do we work within cosmic order? And interestingly, what happened once they got to this stabilization and really started answering these questions for themselves, as a beautiful cosmic measure, the star Merope was created for them. And Merope is a place, because remember, they were these wandering rebel angel stars. It's a place where the freedom of the soul can be maintained as one of the highest level axioms of creation. And the description of it is it's just built perfectly for the soul that wants freedom, the way the world is constructed. But what they had to learn was that you need to use, you don't use your freedom against each other, but for the sake of others, like how to be individual, but within a whole. And that's really, so that's why I'm seeing Merope and Uranus together. And I mean, I know Uranus has other meanings astrologically, but I think it's really beautiful that this is the Pleiadian aspect of it.
Here's another way, Leslie, that I've understood this story from perhaps more from the Celtic and Norse traditions, is that originally the Lemurian world was her story. We can say it was the yin world where everything was in connection and in service. And then the sun, we can say, in the way that you're putting it, rebelled and gave us the yang individuated experience that we've been having. And we've now finished his story. And now we're coming to this place of our story, which is where we get to be both. We get to be the individuated piece of consciousness, but within the collective space. And I've often understood the whole of the previous cycles in that way. But what the Stellations has given me is an even more precise way of understanding that from the actual movements of the stars and indeed our sun. And that's actually how it was explained in some of the older traditions, like the Druidic tradition, which is a very solar tradition. And they understood that the incoming solar energy of the Christ consciousness and the angelic realms was something that needed to happen. Buddha came 500 years before Jesus, because he wanted to show us the nature of our mind and assisted us in that process. So everything is always perfect, but I think it's really beautiful to understand the story also from the way that you're sharing it, because it gives us another level of depth there.
Yeah, and I will say I agree with all that as the trajectory, but just a little more precise in this system. Say, you'll remember Tiamat was exploded and Earth was a piece of Tiamat, and Tiamat was basically exploded because of the male serpents in this galactic problem. Earth was rent from Tiamat with a big, there's a whole plate missing in the Pacific Ocean. And when the solar system was already formed, and the Lemurian age came as a start to definitely laying in the goddess. And it was, in fact, over that rent. And it was purposely meant to impress what it was to have a world with a goddess. and it was had to demise because we had to solve the other problems we had brought up in this solar system, which
Right.
was the tilting of to yang and the whole masculine imbalance, which is why Atlantis came in and could have been a solution, but wasn't. And even Egypt could have been a solution and wasn't. And honestly, we're still kind of dealing with it. So
Yeah.
we do see that. I'm kind of suggesting now, as we're getting closer to this Aquarian age, things are really hustling because our sun is kind of going like, you know what, guys, we don't have that much time. And the sun is, the conductor, and the sun wants to be reconnected with his Pleiadian family in some different way, and wants his own family. It's the success of his own fate if our galaxy can bring all this back into balance.
In fact, me and you were talking about this the other day, weren't we, in relation to the precision points, and it's a very wormwood kind of quality, which is it's not done until it's done, and the final seconds still mean it's not done. And this is in a conversation we were talking about something else to do with Black Moon Lilith, but it's like it's the same. But I feel like the message of the sun is like, hey, there's a lot still to happen, and it feels like we're right at the end of the cycle, but don't discount any of it. It's all important, and it's not done until it's done. And I love that because it keeps us in the present moment and keeps us anchored and centered and aware of stuff, and that we don't just keep kicking it down the road, which is, I think, a bit of a human tendency that we've been programmed with, so that we don't become aware of what is going on. But I feel that the biggest gig in town is to become centered and aware of what is happening in any moment. In some people will call it the now, I guess.
Definitely. It's because, yeah, well, I won't go into that part, but that's very right. And there's more ways to elucidate on that, but we'll stay with this right now. Okay. So now we're going to go to Mars, right? Which I kind of suggested, and partly based on our last conversation too, extenuating. He's going through Pisces, a little bit of a tunnel for him because it's Pisces, the sort of the unconscious. He's been seeing different things. I've been watching the stars he's been going through, not always comfortable. But here he is at 2233 Pisces on the 20th, 3 stars. Let's hear what their messages are. First of all, there's Markeb, which is a star on where the wing of the Pegasus meets the Horus. And the whole idea of this is the realization kind of the whole Pegasus nation. Like, you're riding the back of the Pegasus with your soul codes as a messenger, and you're realizing the importance of your importance of your mission, which is when the creator gives you a piece of living news as a seed of light to plant somewhere, you're to go do that. Because what a messenger is doing in the Pegasus nation is connecting worlds and concepts and ideas and information with an energy flow. And they do that by using their presence, their consciousness, and their heart. That's us too. And energy flows start to operate then as living links between different spheres and peoples. And this helps the created worlds and the beings in them realize that they're part of one whole. It's like when Pegasus messengers fly around with her messages, they're literally drawing lines of light that start connecting the consciousness. But it's interesting that this is on Mars because it's a little bit of it's a more mature concept. It's really what his original fate was about. Look, you're about connecting, you're about being present, directing this energy. And he hadn't realized that. So he's seeing that on Markeb here. And then he's got 2 hard things to look at. There is a star from the Phoenix constellation, Karja, 2047 Pisces. It's the real analogy of Pluto in the 8th house. And it's the mystery of letting go. And the thing about it is, you cannot bargain and say, oh, show me what's ahead and then I'll jump. It's like you absolutely have to jump into the void. And interestingly, it's kind of a cosmic law. If you have that kind of faith, some hand will come and lift you, because you can only be reborn if the release is totally complete. You must let the past burn to ashes. And I want to suggest here, I mean, it's kind of hard to think as a human in practical terms. Well, do I have to give up my family, my house? What do you mean letting go? I think really the basic thing we need to let go of is thinking that we're in control or trying to be in control, because then we don't have the connection and messages with the larger divine flow and what it wants to show us, especially at this evolutionary point. So what about this star? It shows us, or it's telling us, when we've accepted the end and the death of something, that suddenly everything turns around and a new dream actually does awaken from a distance, and it draws contours of new faces into our future. And it starts speaking about all that awaits us. So it's very Plutonian, have to die to be reborn. But this is what Mars is seeing now.
Leslie, do you mind if I just interject there and share something on this? Because this is very pertinent for me in my recent experience. And I mean, you've talked a lot about this personally, but until that moment comes, you can't imagine what does it look or feel like, because you're not meant to. But I think it's a bit like the moment in the Indiana Jones movie where he has to cross the abyss, and there's actually a bridge there, but he can't see it. But it requires him to put the first foot, and then he feels it under his feet, and then he can see the rest of it. It's somehow something a bit like that, but also there's even more mystery around it. And in my current circumstances, I've been immobilized, and I'm having to trust everything is for a higher purpose. Otherwise, I could go to many very lower frequency places and be fooled of fear and other things. But I had to accept at some point in the last month or so that, hey, this has all happened for a reason that I've agreed to be as part of my divine destiny. And therefore, it's going to be okay. And it doesn't really matter what happens from this point forwards. I'm trusting that it's all going to be okay, because why would my higher self actually choose something for me that's not okay? So I just want to share that as a personal reference point, because there could be many things that happen around this conjunction, this astrological transit, that could give people some sort of scary incident where they're going to have to be in the dark night of the soul or the abyss, but have to go into that place of trust, which I know comes up a little bit again towards the end of Mars's cycle when he conjuncts with Neptune for his sort of almost like his final test. Have you got this yet? Are you still in the darkness? Do you have the trust? So I just think this is a really important part of this story that I want people to somehow log in their awareness. It's always okay. It's always okay.
And we can also say, in the vast universe, or the force that does catch us and care for us, trust and faith, those are actually, they're two frequencies. When the Christ soul came in the form of Jesus, literally planted in humanity, then those 7 frequencies around the heart chakra, the ethereal heart chakra, they're the Big Dipper. They're the 7 wisdoms. But we are literally at a time where those frequencies are like being watered into blossoming. So that's when you talk about the heart portal. So this is a horrible situation sometimes, but if you can attain the true feeling of the trust and the faith, those are really the 5th dimensional type of frequencies. And you can't imagine what will happen next, because it's so amazing. Or acceptance. They're such clear platforms. You just stand there and they magnetize other things to you, and they keep you out of the duality. You may still engage in the duality because you have to, you're alive and you've got situations, but you're literally like doing it from a consciousness point that is in the 5th, really trust, faith. They're the heart wisdoms.
And if you think about the energy of Pluto, like you said, it's like very scorpionic, death and rebirth. And it's like, what is it that really dies? I would suggest that it's one of the lowest frequencies of all. It's fear of the unknown. I think probably the thing that most humans carry is like, I need to be secure. I need to know that it's going to be okay. And we've been so heavily programmed into that way of thinking that we can't see anything that we don't know other than something to be afraid of. And actually, if we flip that as something to be excited about, hey, I don't know what's coming to me, but I trust that it's going to be super cool because the universe supports that idea, and anything else actually is an aberration of what the universe wants, then we start to actually flip the dial and say, hey, maybe it's more fun to know, not to know what's coming next. So I just want to offer that as an alternative idea as well.
No, it's true. And I would say, of course, like, why would there all be all these stars with all these qualities? And like I said before, we have some of the really high qualities and we have the low ones, and we need to merge them and blend them and evolve them. It's like, see, that's part of even what Solana didn't understand about his mission and fate. It's really kind of ours too, to blend and harmonize everything from all these different angles.
Right.
Okay, so
I actually
continuing.
like this star. I get excited by it. Maybe it's because I'm so scorpionic, but I'm like, yeah, definitely
Yeah.
Earth. You know, this is very Plutonian, but it's also very necessary because without these processes, we can't evolve as beings. We get stuck actually in certain cycles. And that's why we've got these kinds of stars and
Oh,
planets to
yeah.
assist us with this process.
Weird
This one,
again.
however, I'm not so sure about. This one looks a little
Excited
creepy.
Scorpio.
Uh,
Well, this is interesting that this here, Zeta Reticuli, an arthropod star, 2417 of
oh,
Pisces. Now, granted, I'm doing the stars that are in orb based on, I know that it's not exactly where Mars is, but it's in orb.
but Mars is going to pass over all of these in the next week
Well,
or
I
so.
know it's
As
literally now touching Mars. It doesn't matter,
right,
so
exactly,
it's
yeah.
not astrological in that sense of the
True.
it's in the orb of Mars. So here's interesting that it shows up with Karja which is really an intense initiation if you think about it. The Zeta Reticuli is really home of the Greys, the fallen arthropods. And it's a mirror next to Karja. It's what it looks like if you don't jump, if you don't do the mystery of letting go, if you don't take the initiation. Because what happens is you're not divinely renewed. You're not, and consequently, you're shriveling, getting contorted. You need to take energy from other sources. You're stuck in the third and fourth dimensions. You have some powers because you've been something, but it's a place that can't offer light, this kind of being. But this being is part of us. It's part of us. And like, if you're afraid to jump, look at this. It's like, I'd rather jump than go here. Because, and it's a call into temptation or extortion or compulsion, these things that might catch us on the 3D, and we don't realize the extent of the consequence. So I just think this is really interesting that Mars is having to look at these three, because it's this
It's
I'm
profound.
calling it the masculine part of egoic part of Solana that wants to mature a little bit and know how to use his yang. So he's going through this Piscean underworld, really, with a lot of different looks.
I mean, if we think about the energy of the arthropods and the greys, Leslie, the way I would understand this is the projected simulation that we live in. This is the narrative that's given to us by the goggle box, by the hallucinatory narratives that are projected into our awareness that aren't really real, but are manipulated from the fourth dimension into the third dimension. So I think that's also a nice counterpoise to the different realities that some of us exist in, which can be very 3D based on the projections from the 4D, or it can be something that we've elevated ourselves above to the eagle's perch of 5D. And we can see, this isn't really real. However, it looks very real. And particularly if you sit and watch some of the news channels for too long, it can feel very real because there's a lot of energy projected through that. But actually, it's not. And I think that that's perhaps why Mars has got this counterpoint at this time to show us the different options, the bifurcation point. Which one of these are you choosing right now?
Right. And literally, that's us. That's like us on an egoic level. What are we going to do? Can we see? Can we discern? Can we understand the consequences of one or the other, of jumping or not jumping, and what could happen if we don't? So then I'm pulling in Lilith as part of the Roaring 20s because, look, she's opposite Mars. So she's a very feminine, right, being. She has incredible stars on her. Now, Lilith is a very complex emotional response that can have a lot of faces, and I can't see what it says. Okay. And manifestation and individual compensations. Why? Because Lilith in the cosmic history Black Moon Lilith represents really the wound of expulsion, devaluation, exclusion from important areas of life, from knowledge, from governance, from any equality. All that has to heal, but that's based in the stellar nations on the story of what happened to the great feline and to the female serpents. So there's really a very deep part of us, especially if we have those codes strongly, that have been hugely injured, that show up in Lilith. So Lilith is really the memory of the sanctity of what the God made. God made the God and the goddess as the highest form and expression of himself, but in two forms so they could love each other and be complementary. It's like the formation of those God and the goddess is really the original Garden of Eden. And so part of the anger of Lilith is from the female serpent and the great feline is the deep memory of the truth that's being violated. So Lilith is opposite Mars. Now, is she going to be bitchy and mad? Like she has a persona because she's working on getting over it. I'm going to say it's interesting that Lilith is in Virgo because Lilith we can call the mirror of the inner underworld. Just highlighted a few things. This is from the book because there's a whole exploration of every house that Lilith is in and the astrological sign, because each one is sort of a different psychological state and represents a kind of different toolkit of working with the Lilith wound and where you are with it. But Virgo is interesting because there's sort of feelings of being pulled back, maybe heart a little frozen, but it's because the soul's coming to realize it really wants to find the deepest root of its pain. It wants to accept and forgive it and be able to reconcile with her fate. It's interesting that she shows up in Virgo now. It's appropriate because she realizes inside if she can do this, if she can be lifted in a spiritual rapture and feel grace and love of God and the goddess, that's what she wants. So it's kind of like Virgo's kind of it being a stage in processing these deep feelings of anger, bitterness, and sorrow over the oppression and exploitation. And it's going into a kind of acceptance, maybe even a feeling of atonement, but sort of willing to move on. So what stars does she have on her? They're so beautiful. I didn't do slides for these. I thought we could go through them faster this way. The angel star Alkes, it's the Archangel Raphael. The whole star is about being lifted back to the angelic heart. The message is God has healed. And we talked about in the last show, the feminine being receptive and healed in a way that it could accept in the matured male. I mean, that was a whole other constellation thing we saw. But here we've got Lilith sort of with the same energy opposite Mars. Like, here I am, look, I'm offering a fuller feminine here. Then it's got the angel star Avoir. This star wasn't revealed to our collective unconsciousness until 2020. It's so fascinating because 2020, when we realized really the big kind of break and awakening happened in the sense that COVID pushed us into either you were going to be sort of snowed by the system or you were going to see into it. 3 stars were revealed. And in the cosmic cycle, it was called the year of the year of the whale and the redemption of the fallen angel. So it was really the rebirth of the fallen angel in the cosmic, in our consciousness, which is a whole bigger story. But what it meant was these 3 stars showed us a new possibility. There's Avoir is the second one. And the fact that we saw it meant that we were ready for it. Avoir is where we get our wings back. We can finally reaccess the ethereal bridge, which connects us to source. We can hear the creator speaking to us. We can feel the immaculately pure reality of this shining universal one. And we can really start to understand we come from that and we're part of it and we can return to it. Now, there is one further star, which is like a total return. It's Mia Placidus. It's at early Scorpio. And it basically, that star is saying that if you can attain that soul particle of it, you have realigned with your original fate. And now you get a second seal of destiny or a second kind of fate or destiny, I guess you'd call it. And that second seal has you seated in a 5th dimensional consciousness and being a living bridge back to the 3rd dimension. So there was a huge wake up, especially people with a lot of fallen angel codes in 20, which we've seen. And Avoir is the second one, and what that says, though, it's kind of like when Chiron was found in 1977. the collective was suddenly able to deal with the wounding. Now we can actually imagine that we could make it all the way back just because those stars were revealed. Now they've been there forever, right? It's just that we haven't seen them. It might have been on your Antares code and you're 50 years old, but now you have a better opportunity to come into that soul aspect of yourself. And Denobula is really amazing on the great felines. It's the star where the great felines start out from for Earth. The great felines that were left in this galaxy, because a lot of them were pushed out to the Andromeda galaxy, although we know from the other shows that they're coming back. But what Denobula is, it's a really important initiation station because the great felines learn to fight against injustice and oppression. But the great feline style of fighting for justice is not with brutal force. It's the wisdom of the feminine fighting style. It's the intuition, it's the refinement, it's careful, it's considered.
Mm.
So we've also got Denobula, the winged lion nation comes through that. And that's the nation that it's the part of us that wants to aspire to learn to use power well. And using power well means knowing how to let the divine frequency come through you unimpeded by your ego. Now,
Right.
Denobula is the very first stage of the training, but what it says is your being wants that training. So, and we've got an arthropod star here, but it's being used properly. It's not a fallen one. So Lilith is giving a beautiful feminine message to all of us about healing, and specifically to Mars, as she's right opposite him on Virgo of all things, because that's a real solid holding.
So what I'm getting from this, Leslie, is first of all, the beautiful message that you've shared, but also it's like maybe the wounded feminine can give up now the wounding and say, hey, no need for me to be the victim anymore. Whenever I think of Lilith, I always think of those wonderful comedy series of Cheers and Fraser and Fraser's ex Lilith, because I think she's meant to embody many of the characteristics of Black Moon. But what aside from that, what I'm getting is this opportunity to let go of that victimhood that Lilith represents as the wounded feminine with all of these wonderful stars. Sort of giving that, hey, this is an opportunity for a rebirth too. But you also just pulled briefly into the mix there something which is going to get triggered almost immediately after this, which is Mia Placidus with the full moon in Scorpio just 3 days after the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. So I feel like that's the next stage of the story about to get triggered too. So we can see that this is not a sort of a moment by moment thing. This is all part of a flowing and moving picture that is triggering one part of the evolution to the next. And this is always going on. We know that. But at the moment, it's much more accelerated, much more heightened, and I think much more in our awareness that this is a process that we're all in right now. So I find that really exciting.
It is exciting. And it's almost funny to think about how we're breaking it down. Because what is the reality? The reality is, and this is exactly what Solana was originally, as I've said a couple of times already, his fate was to just be that gear that lets evolution flow through. That's really what we're meant to be as humans, and then to experience and literally have the galaxy as our backyard, even beyond our solar system. Our solar system is just Solana's creation. It's his opportunity to regain his fate and by being in control of it and by creating it. So here's a funny thing. Go ahead.
It's the teaching of the elder mother of the elder tree, which is to become the hollow bone so that we can experience everything without having any attachments or versions, and just to kind of almost reside in the splendor of everything, and to be the observer, to be the fifth dimensional witness to all and say, wow, isn't that just incredible? And not to place good, bad, or lightning. It's like, it's all incredible, really. The synchronicities and dynamics of what is at play it's like, what kind of mind can create this? It's certainly way beyond mine. And I think that that's what we're starting to understand. We're starting to see the creative mind that is behind all of this, which I think is also pretty amazing.
Right. And then you made a comment before we got on about, I don't know, maybe it'll be boring because we don't have.
Yeah, I wasn't really meaning that. It was more of an idle Davyd kind of a
It's
thought.
like, wait, what if everything just happens? No, there is shadow. There's always some catalyzing shadow in the polarity laws of the fifth and sixth dimensions are such that the increasing shadow decreases the increasing light decreases the shadow. Whereas on third dimension, it's always equal and opposite. It's really tough. But I did point out to you, I think we have no idea of the playground and the capacity that can happen when we bring our light body into our physical body and we have the galaxy. And each one of these stars are sentient worlds. I mean, we don't have to put on those virtual glasses that they're trying to rob us with. You know, that actually exists. It's like, yes, those virtual things are helping us understand and remember that. Unfortunately, they're also trying to co-opt and just stop on the glasses rather than
Right.
and go there. But we'll see
Well,
what
you know,
happens.
I want to share something that you showed me, Leslie, with our audience, which has given me, I mean, I've already kind of thought about this quite a bit, but the video that you showed me recently, which was actually about, it was a redacted file on the Malaysian flight that disappeared. But the ultimate point of it was to show that there is already anti-grav technology that can allow us to apport and reappear in different places. Now, for anyone who's done rabbit hole work, you know, and looked into the Montauk project and Philadelphia experiment, that's not necessarily particularly new, but for many people, it probably would be new to imagine, oh my God, imagine, you know, instead of going to the bus stop, you go to your spaceport and there is your little anti-grav spaceship. And next thing you can be on another side of the universe in your 3D cosmic human Jedi body. I think that that is what is coming towards us. And that is something to get excited about, because that's something that I understand has never really happened before, to be that kind of being in this kind of spacesuit
I know.
consciously.
Yeah. And then back on the eclipse, a few of the stars had a few of the planet, I forget, had Alpharez on them. Might have been Mercury and something else. It was a couple things. That's the
Yeah.
launch pad. It's a launch pad where you go to a certain part of the star based on what dimension you're going to go to. You pick up the appropriate, like,
That's
what
right.
you
Yes.
call. So
Super
anyway,
cool.
it's all kind of
We all get
there.
to live out our Star Trek and Star Wars
Oh, yeah,
fantasy existences, right? We all get to put on our space
right.
suit outfits and say, "Hey, I get to be the captain in my own spaceship very, very soon." So
I
I'm
know.
gunning for that one. That's part of my new Earth reality, anyway.
And that's why I want to bring this out or in, really, because it's like, whoa, wait, you know, guys, this is like all inside of you. And because it's inside of you, these are little portals you can go into. So anyway, Ceres is another one around 20 degrees. So here's the mother asteroid, but what is she? She's a piece of Tiamat, right? And she's got her mythology. She's basically the perfect example of a being who had to integrate shadow and light because her daughter was taken. She turned everything dark. You know, there was going to be no creation unless she compromised. So she compromised. We have 2 seasons of light and 2 of dark. But anyway, Ceres is standing here kind of giving motherly advice, I feel like. Maybe even giving motherly advice to Jupiter and to Uranus, who I'm going to call Solana's higher soul, and his sister Merope, who's learned her lesson. So let's look at these stars. I did some slides on them because it's really nice advice. First of all, we've got the star Vega. She's in Capricorn, which is nice. She's another earth element, and the kids, I call them the kids, they're in Taurus. So Vega is a star where you go for initiation into power. And power is the ability to run the divine frequency through you without your ego getting in the way. Your ego is a structure. There's nothing wrong with your ego, but it's not who you are. It just holds your scaffolding so divine can run through you. You become a leader that way because the divine frequency is higher than other frequencies, and in the laws of science, lower frequencies entrain up to higher ones. So 2 parts of ourselves have had initiations or have initiations on Vega. The wing lion part, the wing lion is the nation that's asked to be the rightful leader by getting this initiation into power. They passed their initiation on Vega. Then we've got the dragon part of ourselves, which is of a warrior nature, and its assignment is wonderful, great powers. I just did a video on it, but its assignment is to guard this wing lion who's just running the divine frequencies. It's to use all its gifts and powers to uphold divine order. So essentially it's upholding the wing lion who's running the divine order through. The dragon did not pass. So we have mother's telling us, look, what are you going to do? The dragon didn't pass because the dragon just could not believe that the creator actually didn't want the powers that it had to be used to run creation, because it was so powerful, so forceful, control of the elements. I mean, this is just the fallen part of the dragon. There's beautiful dragons. But the dragon looked at the winged lion just running this energy, and it was kind of like, you're not doing anything. This is lame. The creator was wrong. But the example here is that the mom's saying, look, remember that initiation? It can go one of two ways. Then you've got a star on the Eagle constellation, and the Eagle is the whole constellation that takes us up for initiation on Vega. And there's many steps to the Eagle to get ready for it. This particular one, Alphalanum, it's speaking about our roots. It's asking us to examine our roots. So this is like mom saying this, right? To the other pieces of Solana, Psyche, maybe to Jupiter and Uranus especially. It's asking, who are you and where are you on your pathway? Look at who you are, where you come from, and what your purpose is. And so to what extent have you made yourself capable of a leading role? You know, this is an analysis thing, but at the roots. Okay, the other star is an eagle, another eagle star, and it's the tail of the eagle. And so there's a star on each part of the tail. Basically, it represents the necessity to have inner and outer balance. It also represents when the eagle flies you up for initiation on Vega, its tail is pointing down to the earth. And the message in that is that you're not going to Vega to get this initiation to turn into some guru and avatar and fly off into the netherworlds. You're getting this initiation to come back here and serve and move things down here. Okay, then we've also got coming from Ceres, 2 stars on the arthropod nation, one that is being badly misused and one that is being used quite well. Arthropod nation is basically a web goes through every created thing. It moves the information to the creator so the creator can respond. Certain stars are transfer stations. The ones with negative have been taken by the fallen ones, and the information is grabbed and misused. The positive ones, it goes on to the creator. So we're really dealing with 4 aspects, 4 nations particularly, that this is what we see in the world now, that don't want to let go. They haven't taken the initiations. They don't want to let go. It's the fallen arthropods, the fallen male serpents, the fallen dragons, and the fallen angels. But many have come back to the fold, and some haven't even left. Okay, then we're still doing the roaring 20s. We've got Chiron, and Bait and Kados is still hanging around. We talked about that in at the eclipse, because that's right where the eclipse was.
Leslie, maybe I can just add something here that's occurring to me. So what we just looked at is very interesting with Ceres, because it's very much about initiation into maybe leadership or a new type of leadership, and being aware of how that perhaps wasn't dealt with properly before. And then what we've got here is also Chiron still around Bait and Katos. And I know that we've talked about this a lot off camera. But also it's just like, well, maybe this is the time when those fallen beings, maybe the people in leadership, the people that have held sway in the positions of power, what we've called the so-called mafia beings over the domain that has been planet Earth, which maybe could even be considered to be a prison planet somewhat in the form of Bait and Katos, are now being dealt with, and we're being offered the opportunity to have another go at leadership, but without these kind of more inverted beings who have used various technologies, particularly those from the arthropods and other inverted practices, to keep us in a place of servitude. So would you say that perhaps what we're seeing is the freeing up through these different movements on this particular sort of conjunction that's coming in, to give us the first glimpse of what a different type of leadership could look like as we progress into the new Earth frequency?
Yes, I would want to hope so. And I would really want to hope that all the rogue elements would be thrown in Bait and Kados again. Who knows? I mean, the Galactic Council many times has gotten to a point in our cosmic history. It's like, it's time for you to go into this chamber of mirrors. It is essentially like a hell to these beings, in the sense it's a fourth dimensional, very contracted consciousness with very little light coming in. But it is a chamber of mirrors. It's really a cosmic timeout. And really, Chiron being where the wound is, even for all of us, and even for Solana, Kate and Katos can also be regarded as, okay, there's a cosmic process. You can go in this chamber of mirrors, and we're offering you to see things, so then you can say, oh, wow, I made a mistake. I'm going to surrender, because there's a cosmic principle that there's always mercy or grace that comes when you surrender.
Right.
You truly surrender. I mean, that's why the hand comes when you jump off Karja. If you truly surrender, you get lifted back up. And that's what
Right.
all the Pleiadian stars realize when you read the in-depth stories of them. Each one of those 7 Pleiadian stars it's interesting, because they're a female archetype of wounds that we see all over the place on Earth. But we don't really have them. We don't have a lot of feminine things in the sky, except the Venus and the moon, as far as our collective conversation. But there's these 7 beautiful Pleiadian stars who really quite watch over us. I mean, the Meropes aspects come in very much at certain stages of people's lives. They come to defiant children, they come to teenagers, they come to women at menopausal, when they're having trouble with menopause. Sometimes a lot of trouble with menopause has to do with deep repression of your true self earlier, and so your body's acting out in menopause. So we have, the Pleiades have been helping us. It's almost like you could call that our future self. They went through all the fallings, they've seen it, and they're here like, let's help you come into the fold. So Bait and Kados also, we could say, because it's out collectively, let's use this chamber of mirror, because there's actually rebirth possible from it. It doesn't have to be so onerous. But
Well,
if you,
also, I think it gives us the opportunity for compassion, Leslie. And I've shared this a little bit in some recent videos, partly based on my own journeying recently. But what I perceived on the eclipse was that these powerful beings have been taken back to Bait and Katos, because their time here has served its purpose. But also, we have to thank these beings for allowing us to dive deep into the 9 realms of the underworld and the shadow world. And we needed these beings to be able to experience that polarity of duality of light and dark. So at the ultimate end of the spectrum, these beings have also served an incredible purpose. So I think that in some way, if we can really find it within ourselves, because we all have the potentiality for Bait and Katos within us, for many people, it's going to be in their codes. And so again, there's that fractal mirroring. And also, what I think is really interesting is that the Mayans, as in the Mayans who came here to the planet, we're starting to perceive, particularly through the work that my partner Bella is doing with the Mayan time and magic, is that the Mayans time traveled and left these coding here on the planet so that we could remember all these things, because they've already, as you've just said, been through this process. So they're like, hey, we want to help you, but we can't really give too much, but we can leave you these codes because we're time travelers from the future. So again, we've got all of these different, I guess, ways of looking at things. But I
right.
would love to suggest to everybody watching this that we are now into a different piece since the eclipse, and that many of the misusers of power have been dealt with, and they are now experienced back in the Hall of Mirrors. Maybe not all of them. We'll have to see how things play
Well,
out.
we
But
still have our work to do, but yeah, I do want to hope, I hope that's true.
well, I
Of
mean, this is also where the fractal piece comes in, is we can't just say, hey, like the bad guys have been taken care of, I can put my feet up now and do nothing. It's like, no, there's a fractal mirroring process here. So if they're being dealt with, it also means that we're being dealt with, or we're having to deal with ourselves. And if we're
Well,
not
yeah,
dealing with
maybe on a
ourselves
different level, you're right. But that's what I
on a
want to
different level.
suggest, actually. We're all in this now, but I want to say it's an opportunity. We don't have to think of it as the lockdown. Like, we literally, yeah. it's
It's
so
all
ironic.
perspective, right? And the Hall of Mirrors is a useful tool, I think. I think when I was in the Amazon, my teacher explained it to me slightly different. He had a different name for it, but he said this is a place where really bad shamans can go, brujos. Sometimes as a last resort, they can be put into this space. He called it something else, but he said every action that they take, every particularly, I guess you could say, lower frequency magic action, will immediately come back on them, and it will keep coming back on them and keep coming back on them until eventually they realize that they're doing it to themselves, and they can keep blaming other people, saying you're doing this, you're attacking me. But in the end, the Hall of Mirrors will show them that it's really them that's doing it by their lower frequency actions. So even in the Amazon, they have a way of understanding this for dealing with bad shamans. So and I think it's kind of interesting.
There's also, you could call that instant karma, and it's not always in effect, but I know there's been call outs for instant karma because it is a way of helping the rogue elements understand and start to clear up the field. So yeah, just there are all sort of variations. Now I want to suggest, this is interesting. I'm not exactly sure what to make of this. Venus, which in Solana's mind is his sister Electra. Oh, by the way, when you said the Mayans or the Mayan star is a Pleiadian star.
Right.
Yeah, and so there's a lot about that. Well, we can bring it up next time because he's going to be meeting his whole Pleiadian family. But they very definitely, the whole nature of the Mayans is to, when they're in the dark night, which is very short time, they constantly observe what effects it has, and they make formulas and plans because they know the vibratory qualities. And the Maya always comes into the photon belt at the same time Earth does, even though it has a very short cycle. We are 11,000 years. They're going around light, and they're attained already. But when we come into the photon belt, they do, and they have this whole arsenal of observations that they release into with us, with all that light, that are like formulas for dealing with how we've been hurt by the shadow. And we suddenly start discovering, this is what we're discovering, different vibrational remedies, or we just start opening to them. But
We
you're right.
actually talked about this, didn't we, on when you guest appeared on Bella's Mayan Time and Magic course.
Yeah.
Just recently. We got into this whole aspect about this with the Mayans, which I think is super interesting because we're now again in that space. And I feel even with what Bella's doing, the Mayan energy is coming back again and reminding us all of this information that people
very definitely. Like we're trying to remember, like, wait a minute, there's a navigatable way through this,
right?
the injuries of your shadow. You're now back in the light, so you can start to re-identify differently. You're not living in the shadow anymore, and kind of silly to pull it with you because you're actually fully in the light.
Right. I think that's the point. Like, why do you want to carry this heavy duty ballast with you? There's no need for it anymore. It doesn't have to be there. It's like, yeah, right. Why do I want to carry
hard for us to believe that. It's really such a huge paradigm shift, but that's why I want to bring stuff out like this, and why I like the stellar consciousness, because I mean that's what I mean about the stellar consciousness raising our collective consciousness out of our planetary consciousness. So Venus is actually so Mars, Solana as Mars, sort of like Venus is sort of, she's gorgeous, right? She's the feminine that got so deeply hurt by the fallen dragons and angels, and because she was breached, they used her light body to get to the higher worlds. It's not nice stuff. But she's in Bait and Kados with a negative star. I don't know that she's like suffering there. I almost feel like it's Mars or Solana's Psyche having to look at, oh my God, my choice as an adolescent to leave my fate, kind of hurt people too. So you can interpret this the way you want, or maybe it's also the feminine sort of chamber of mirrors, getting rid of some of the last feeling of victimhood.
Do you know what, Leslie? It's a really difficult part of the cosmic history code story, this one with Electra and what happened there. But I feel maybe it's the really deep part of our shadow that's very difficult for the human psyche to look at, particularly when we think about some of the really inverted stuff that's happened with trafficking. I think it's all part of the same kind of abuse of that power and of that energy, particularly when it comes to sexual abuse. And I think maybe that's part of the really difficult stuff that humans find difficult to look at, that does still need to be raised up out, so that we can have forgiveness for the beings that are probably now in Beta and Katos, wondering what they're doing now, who engage in those activities and perhaps even were the masters behind those activities. So I don't know, it is difficult. It's difficult to think about, it's difficult to read, it's difficult to talk about. But but because of that, that's why it's kept so suppressed, because it's difficult for us to look at. And maybe it doesn't need to be looked at for too long, maybe just 2 or 3 days, or, because Venus is going to pass through this pretty quickly, because she enters into Taurus fairly soon. So she doesn't hang around in this place. It's just like almost like, hey, we need to look at this, but hey, now we can let it go. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, because I also, if I take it to my larger premise that we're looking at Solana's psyche and our psyche with everything that's around this 20th degree, well, with everything actually, but I'm just pulling out the 20th degree because I can't do the whole chart. And also it is, I think, constellated around Jupiter and Uranus coming together and what that means. Like they are looking at, oh my God, we both had experience using our Aquarian urges in a teenage way, and now we have an opportunity to use them in a different way. So yeah. Now, what I wanted to say, we've alluded to this, but Beta and Katos is actually quite beautiful. If you surrender and accept more mercy, you're reborn from Beta and Katos. In the galactic myth, the fallen angel is reborn into the light body of the whale, and it's going through this beautiful metamorphosis process through the different stars back to Spica, its home star. Still has a little bit of penance, but anyway, the point is, Beta and Katos doesn't lock you away from the principle of the divine principle of mercy. There's always the potential to be lifted back, but you have to kind of fold into getting rid of victimhood, getting rid of penance. Like you think you're paying back God, like, oh, pick me because I'm so sorry I did that. No, you have to move into, all right, I know that you want me to be whole. I'm just going to be so humble, to be so completely surrendered that's when grace comes in. You get pulled back.
Otherwise, it's actually another sly trick of victimhood. It's just another slightly different disguise that victimhood could wear. It's like, hey, I was really bad and now I'm going through my penance, and there's still a little bit of porn in.
Yeah, we go through stages and we have to realize that. And that's part of the ego's games. And that's why that's part of like Mars as trying to mature his ego. Because even Lilith is showing him, oh, look, you can be on the first stage of the winged lion, Denobula. Look, you have the urge to come in for this. And the mother's saying, hey, when you go up to Vega, like examine yourself and go up for the winged lion initiation. There's choices. What we're seeing here, there's like choices all along the way. And this all exists in us. And we're always having to make choices every day through the hard reality of the third dimension. But actually, they're based on bigger principles that are in work at us, at work in us. So the last thing I want to do is, here's our sun, right? We're talking about the psyche of our sun and all these other planets, but like sun is only an early Taurus, but it's really interesting to look at what stars are on our sun. Like our sun is sitting there, right? With all this happening, and he's the conductor of it, plus all this other stuff. I mean, the South Node, he's remembering being in the Raven prison for misuse of power, so anyway. But what's happening? The cosmic humans, Alresha, I'll just give you a quick rundown. That star is like saying, you need to consciously and deeply consider and feel and analyze all your lives. I mean, as a consciousness, you've come in and out of different incarnations. You need to go over all your experiences carefully. You need to have recognitions and see where there's been experiences of relevance to the pathway of your fate, like because you're trying to reconcile to your fate. Because this also comes through the whale nation, Alresha. And there, what there's the whale, that's the reborn fallen angel, is receiving new service codes. It's receiving kind of a new fate, which is revealed to it in the name of redemption. So that's the whole spring of mercy. It's letting it come back towards the full light. Then we've got the Andromeda Galaxy and Meroc. Let's talk about Meroc with the dolphins. The dolphins are swimming. Meroc is an incredibly beautiful watery world. It's the home of the Pegasus souls, messenger souls. Dolphins swim there. Dolphins are always singing the frequencies of love, which is a state of the galaxy, really, the creator's love. It's not an emotion. It's an underlying state or frequency, but the dolphins sing it in many different ways. But so what Meroc are singing is, or the dolphins are singing from Meroc, you're never alone. You've never been forgotten. You need to heal the illusion of separateness. You can connect to a higher transcendent presence because it's there. Now, Meroc and the Andromeda Galaxy also means something else, in the sense that when you go into the cosmic stories, these parts of ourselves, our lapse had to do with pushing our sovereignty too far, like not knowing that golden mean between free will and the divine order. It was kind of innocent in both cases, and we won't do the stories now because it would take a very long time. But I feel it's interesting that these two show up together all the time, Andromeda Galaxy and Meroc. You pointed this out, actually, Davyd.
We talked a lot about this on the Stellar Nations pathway, and because
right.
I have Chiron conjuncting
Right.
both of these, it's very personal for me. But I always feel there's a sense of naivety that came with the feline and the Pegasus desire.
There was very much
and
so.
It's not bad. It was just, I think, immature. Maybe is the word that we can.
And see, that's the exact reflection too of the sun. It was naive,
right.
You know, adolescent. And I always feel there's a certain poignancy when those stars come around, because they're always together. But it's very potent. I mean, it says a lot that they're on the sun, because it's like the sun is remembering also the naivety of lapsing, you know, because you don't
and
really...
you think it's also the reflection that these things are now getting righted, that maybe that awareness has come to those beings. It's like, well, hey, we did this from a good place, or we
no, it's the whole thing is happening. No, you're exactly right. That's the whole premise of actually what I'm saying. In the Andromeda Galaxy, we know this is the year of the great felines returning. I did a separate YouTube video on that for myself, by myself, but no, this is a healed part of ourself that's coming back. It's beautiful.
And it links directly to Black Moon Lilith on the Nebula, right? Which is about the felines returning en masse and coming back into our consciousness.
Exactly. Because
so
it's kind of really the Nebula also sort of bridges that whole welcoming in of their feline sisters who were pushed out. It's really quite beautiful. There's a big bridges of light and purpose happening, you know. I mean, if we put on our virtual glasses, they don't have to be virtual. If you read these myths, you kind of just start going into them. So
true.
Okay. So a few more interesting things. I'm actually going to just kind of paraphrase read this cosmic human star Mistaratham, because it's so potent. It's a stellar ray that's an initiating star for humans, and it represents the qualities similar to the magician in the tarot. And it's when a masculine being stops and stands in a majestic power experience, full of inner fire, and expresses his will and creates by his will. So this is the entry into the process of creation. And it's done by focusing and deeply concentrating the power of will, the solar energy, and then launching something with that. It sets something into motion, and it fills it with a kind of pure magical power. So what's happening really is there's a fertilization and calling something to life, and that's coming into life from or to, can be any of it, on a physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual level. That's a really strong star to have on the sun. And then the Sheraton is actually an example of a dragon warrior who did not lapse. It's absolutely beautiful. Was deeply hurt for not lapsing, but didn't lapse. Stay true to the let's protect divine will, which is really about protecting our own inner light, you know, our own fate, because Divine will is really a highest intention of the light in us. Now, interestingly, this dragon star, though, there's always a little bit of a, way to make sure you're going to finish it right, or look, not get too overconfident. Mira is about, it's a place of temptation. It's kind of like, can you be purchased for something? Are you tempted because you want to win? Like, what would you give up to enter a pact with me?
Can
So
you be
there's a
bought?
little bit of that, and that's where we can lose our focus and awareness sometimes, I think, more on a 3D level. That's why I like knowing also the stellar rays, because it kind of expands you out and you start seeing the nuances of that when you have to make choices in the 3D. Well, the other interesting thing, it's not even just seeing the nuances. It's like I might be in the middle of a situation and it's literally like a star will drop in, like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. I get a whole new like perception of the 3D situation. So
Well, you know what, Leslie, what I get from this last piece here is, first of all, the beautiful healing energies that I feel like the sun is putting there in that point in Taurus, and showing that many past, we can say, sadnesses, that there is a sort of a beauty in the sadness, I think, to the Andromeda Galaxy and the Mirac stories that certainly touched me when we did the Stellar Nations, and I went into those quite profoundly for a number of months and explored those kinds of aspects of my own coding. But at the same time, there's that thing that I've seen in the spiritual world sometimes, which is in a desire to be spiritual and have all of that, we can end up being bought for our desire to be spiritual. And I think the mirror just gives us that kind of offset, which is like, hey, you don't really need to be bought. It's going to happen anyway. And you can, if you've got that sense of trust and surrender that we've already got, that little bit of the whispering voice, maybe we can say, of the lower frequency stuff doesn't really need to be there. And so maybe it's just that final reminder. It's like, hey, are you sure you've got this under control? Or is there some
oh
part of you
yeah,
that
I think it is
can
a
still be
final
bought?
reminder. And I think it's
Right.
actually meant lovingly. I mean, well, it just happens to come together. I always find it, as I've read codes over the years, so fascinating how they group together, because there is song
We've
unto
said that many times, right?
yeah. But anyway, I would just conclude with really the point is the stars are the cells and organs of our light body. We are all that, and we can embody our light body because we can know it coherently through if we know this stuff that I've just brought out. But we can embody it in our physical body, which helps us expand into our multidimensional consciousness. And then we understand ourselves as part of the whole of creation. And then we get back into being able to maturely enter the Aquarian age that's coming up. We get to be Merope. We get to know like, oh, wait, we can be full beings, but if we do it inside of divine order, nobody gets hurt. And we all have great creativity. I mean, she was literally granted that star that matched her vision of that kind of freedom. So you could go there in your dream world and maybe someday in your real world. So that's all I have here. We can
Oh,
stop.
that's quite a lot. But you know what, Leslie, thank you so much. I hope our audience gets as much from doing these shows as I do from doing them with you, and the beautiful way that you narrate these stories, because when we go inside, and particularly at this time, if we've done our inner work and we've cleaned up our field and we have the ability to go inwards, we can see that this is all playing out. And again, it really depends on where our frequency is at. And if we've done our inner work and freed ourselves of those lower temptational forces or those things that don't serve us, then this is the reality that we can be living in, because it's actually already encoded within us. And as this story unfolds and as you're narrating it for all of us, I feel like it's giving us the pathway to remember who we truly are. And when we combine that with other things like, the breakdown of the Gregorian calendar and the re-emergence of fractal time from our time traveling Mayan future ancestors from the past, something like that, they're giving us the container in which this can make sense for us, so that we don't lose our sense of reality, we don't lose our sense of grounding, because as we become multidimensional, it is easy to start going into fifth, sixth, seventh dimensional consciousness and actually start to lose our anchors down here in 3D, which is why we have a physical body. So this is the journey that we're on. And I think
Well,
it's really beautiful how
yeah.
yeah, go on.
No, I'm sorry I interrupted. Keep going.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's it really. And what I'm understanding from the narration that you're giving us with all of astrological conjunctions, which are also kind of, I've said it before, the stellar nations is like the blueprint behind the blueprint. So if we look at our natal astrology as being the 3D way that we can navigate this, then the stellar nations cosmology, or, you know, cosmic history codes, is our way of expanding back into the fullness of ourselves so that we can be 3D, navigating by the conjunctions and the transits, but also at the same time see how a much bigger story is playing out within us, but also for the collective at the same time. And I don't know where I would be without this, to be honest with you. It's given me a compass to work with. So thank you so
Right.
much.
Right, because it is actually, it shows us the trajectory of our consciousness. So,
Right.
you know, our incarnation is one drop of wanting to work with that consciousness. And we come in very intentionally, like that's why I like the code. You can really see what you want to do, but in relation to who you are as a consciousness. So yeah, it's I think I would take from this in the end that there's so much here. This is just an evidence of it, that all the beauty of these stars and these worlds, and they're all ours to embody. And when you talked before about, when I said about bringing this light body into the physical, maybe that's kind of the dynamic. It, in a way, I mean, our physical body is not the shadow, but we've had to learn to integrate two opposites, and somehow this is the ultimate integration if we can do that.
Right. So, you know, as we come to the end of this episode, and I feel like we've probably got another one coming up soon, because there isn't, the story doesn't slow down. But what I would take away from this, and what I would like to share maybe as a sort of a final point, is this feels like an entry point into a new initiation, into a new world, into a new earth. And we can watch the collapse of the old paradigm happen around us, and we can engage with it. We can even be enmeshed in it if we want to be, or we can say, I don't know, I feel like I'm done with that story. I want something different. I want the more multidimensional cosmological expression of myself to come through. And I don't know how that's going to look, but in order for me to get there, I'm going to have to temporarily let go of mummy and daddy, we can even say, the matrix, the old paradigm, the system that seemingly gave us everything that we needed, but actually there was a price to pay, which was our freedom. And now we can dare to have freedom at the same time, but also have the beauty of the expansiveness that is being offered to us. But we still have to step up. We still have to take those initiatory steps. We still have to look back and say, hey, I kind of didn't get it right last time, but I really want to get it right this time. And we can step into the fullness of ourselves. So I don't know, that's what I'm taking away from this. And that's how I'm living this experience. And that's how I'm choosing to fix my frequency moving forwards.
I think it is. We have all this advice here, and we know that something's got our back, but we do have a responsibility to accept it and grow into it and surrender to it and come to know it. It's something very different. But our soul knows it, our being knows it. I mean, it's a place we've been before at some point.
Right.
That's the remembering part. And
Absolutely.
yeah, when we do, I think the next thing we can do is for a little prior to May 18th, the Jupiter Cazimi, because that whole idea of these Cazimis is Solana looking at himself, right? So with Jupiter, if we follow through on this logic, we'd say, oh, it's kind of his whole soul level. And now he's coming to his whole Pleiadian family. He's coming to Algol, which really we have to understand that, because that's something that we need to work with as a collective to turn that energy around. And we understand it, we can, because literally it could be this kind of dead weight in a cosmic rearrangement if it doesn't clear. There's a whole history of Algol. So we'll share that with the Jupiter Cazimi. So I think your analogy was a good one, that, okay, Solana's going to go home to the holiday dinner and a lot of stuff's going to come out, and it's going to be, there's a lot of hardship happened. He probably feels in some ways he has to resolve, and we do too, guilt for having left our pathway. Oh my God, my sister Electra was breached so badly. What if I had been here to protect her? You know, just things like that. Anyway, we'll do it next time and see what comes out. So thank you for
That's
this.
going to be a bumper episode, because I know that part of the chart quite well, and there's a lot of stars there. But final thing, Leslie, I want to share with the audience from your side is, can people pre-order your newly revamped Stellar Destinies? Is there a place for people to find that? Is there somewhere you can send
It's
them?
going to be a legitimate ebook probably in about 6 weeks. It's all laid out and everything. Bay's just checking the diagrams, and I have to do like a really quick last read to catch anything. But it's really beautiful. And I think, oh my gosh, because it's the Pleiadians, it's the Sirians, it's the Andromeda galaxy, it's Lemuria, it's the ascended. Some Pegasus people were able to ascend back to Mirok, and they came and told Bea and Aniko their stories, 5 Pegasus masters, ascended masters, but their stories through their human lives, and you're going to actually recognize some of these human lives and how
Mhm.
the lessons they learned to get back. Yeah, it's a wonderful, it's really going to be good timing, actually, because we're just so ready to move into this. And this is like reading a good novel or something. It's like,
Right.
God.
Except it's better because it's also
And
somewhat real.
well, it's true. And the whole Orion thing and what happened there, what was some of the
Mhm.
impetus behind the lapses, how did it go so wrong and what happened? And so, yes, thank you for asking that, because I am excited that that's coming out, and
I mean,
it's not that far away, and it's mainly stuck on me because I've been very busy, but I hope to read it this next week. So
well, look, with that in mind, as soon as that comes out, we will probably have a show around that time too. And also just to put out to any of our Spanish speaking audience that my partner Bella has also completed the Spanish translation of the first 2 volumes of the Stellar Nations families. And that also is in process to be released soon. So keep your eye out for that. And also I'm going to put in the show notes for this one, Leslie, the recent link to your dragon video, and also the links to your own Stellar Nations channel. And also, we didn't really cover them so much in this particular episode because there was so much richness in what Leslie shared. But in the recent Quantum Compass episode that myself and Bella just put out, we do cover some of the energies of the full moon in Scorpio that immediately precedes this conjunction, and also has a lot more juice in this cosmic story that unfolds. And of course, we also have a few other things coming up during this next week or two, which are also really important. So please do check that out. So there's another thing I want. Oh yeah, it was Mars conjuncts Neptune, which is also something that me and Leslie have touched on. So there's a lot going on. It doesn't stop here. It's an unfolding story, and you can also read some of this yourself through the various books that are available. Also through getting your Antares code if you don't. And again, I'll put the links in the show notes for you to order your Antares code, which I highly recommend, because these shows are great by themselves, but if you know what your own codes are and you know how these stories that Leslie is sharing relate to each and every one of us within ourselves, then it's going to elevate your consciousness, as it has done with mine, and I believe many other people's too, to a different space. And that is part of the shift. We are becoming conscious, multidimensional beings. And this is the Stellar Nations pathway is giving us, I believe, or it's given me anyway, a reference point for not only what is happening right now, but also what's already happened in my life, particularly some of the more weirder things that could only be explained by this. And what I love about it, Leslie, is the coherency. For me, something is a truth when my body feels the coherency of it. And I found over and over again that Stellar Nations is super coherent. So, and also just for those of you out there interested in Mayan time, please do check out what my partner Bella is doing with the Mayan time and magic course. So I'll put all of these in the show notes too. So we are at the end of today's episode. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Hopefully you found this as interesting and illuminating as I have. And we'll be back again, I think, very soon, Leslie, right, for another episode of the
yeah,
Cosmic
we'll do
History
the
Code.
Jupiter Cazimi for sure. So early May.
Right, exactly.
And
So, and we say that now, and there may well be another episode in between. I wouldn't be surprised, but we'll see how our
3D life is calling me. I have to travel for a week, and I'll be totally taking care of my mother. So sorry.
yeah, we do still have 3D lives to live. That is part
Yeah.
of the process too, that we can't just completely skip and trip out. So anyway, everybody, we look forward to seeing you again very soon. And in the meantime, keep safe and keep it real and keep it cosmic. I think that's where we're heading, everybody. So we'll see you all again very soon.
Because
Ciao for
you are
now.
cosmic, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.